Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. You know, we love to bring you these super interesting stories from history, especially during the Cold War.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And today we're going to be doing a deep dive into a really, really fascinating story about a KGB officer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yuri Ivanovich Nosenko.
Nosenko.
And so we're going to be looking at a whole bunch of declassified documents.
Right.
A lot of CIA stuff.
Right.
And
dispatches.
yeah, a lot of internal memos, dispatches,
Yeah.
kind of thing from...
Pretty much from the time of his defection.
Yeah.
In the early 60s all the way up to the mid-70s.
Yeah, so really...
A good spread.
Yeah, a good spread of time.
This case is super interesting because, it's a real window into how the intelligence community, reacted to defectors, especially during the height of the Cold War.
Yeah, and how they grappled with these questions of authenticity.
Absolutely.
Right? How do you know if someone is
bona fide, the legitimate defector?
Right. If they're legitimate, are they telling you the truth? Are they holding back?
Exactly.
So that's really going to be our mission today, is to kind of go through all these documents, see what they reveal about this whole saga.
About Nosenko, about the inner workings of the CIA and the FBI.
Absolutely. And it all starts in January of 1964.
Yeah.
When Nosenko makes contact with the U.S. and Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
And then he ends up traveling to the United States.
Under agency auspices.
Right, under the agency's wing, he presents himself as a KGB officer from the Counterintelligence Directorate in Moscow. And he claims that his trip to Geneva for this disarmament conference was just a cover story.
Right.
But right away, the CIA, they're suspicious, right?
Right off the bat, yeah, there's that immediate sense of, wait a minute, is this really what it seems?
Yeah.
And, to their credit, they immediately launched investigations, both the Office of Security and the FBI.
Yeah, they both do these huge...
voluminous reports on him.
Yes, but they're different. Yeah, that's the thing.
They both conclude that he's a legitimate defector.
Yeah.
But they get there in different ways, and they also highlight different problems.
Yeah, they have different kinds of concerns right away.
Exactly, right away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what sets the stage for this whole kind of crazy saga.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dig into some of those initial assessments and the doubts that emerged.
Okay.
So just a month after he defects.
February of 64.
Yeah, there's this note.
Yeah.
That pops up expressing concern that he might be giving this kind of sanitized or incomplete account. What really stands out to you in those early expressions of skepticism?
I mean, one of the big ones is this claim that he had no operational responsibilities involving Western intelligence, which seems kind of weird.
Yeah.
If you're a KGB counterintelligence officer, you'd think you'd be involved.
I think you'd be involved in something.
At least somewhat, right? So that immediately raises flags.
Yeah, and that really contradicted the other intelligence that the U.S. already had on him, right?
Exactly. They had information suggesting that he was, a regular KGB staff officer involved in counterintelligence.
Yeah.
So that contradiction right there was a big point of suspicion.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what's he holding back?
Is he holding back, or is he actively misleading us?
Right. And so, they weren't taking any chances. They can find him, right?
Yeah, he was sent to Camp Peary in Virginia.
Right, and kept under pretty tight restrictions.
Yeah, I mean, think about it from their perspective.
Yeah.
This is a guy coming from the heart of the Soviet intelligence apparatus.
Yeah.
They had to be extremely cautious.
Yeah, absolutely. And this wasn't just like a few people in the CIA whispering.
This went all the way up to the U.S. Intelligence Board.
Yeah, in March of 64, the UTHIP, they formally notified both the FBI and CIA about him. So this is a big deal.
Huge deal, yeah.
Yeah. And then in February of 64, shortly after he gets to the U.S., he's actually interviewed by Soviet officials.
That's right.
By the INS and the State Department. And he uses this opportunity to formally reiterate his request for asylum in the United States.
Yeah, so that's him basically, saying, I'm here to stay, I want a defect.
Right.
But of course, that doesn't really solve the underlying intelligence questions.
Right. So let's fast forward a few months to May of 1964.
Okay.
And we've got this memo specifically about Nosenko.
Codename AE Foxtrot.
Right, AE Foxtrot. And the security measures that they outline in this document are really kind of shocking.
They are very, very stringent.
Yeah.
It's clear that the agency is very uneasy about him.
Yeah, they're really watching his every move.
Oh, yeah. I mean, everything is controlled.
Yeah.
His diet, no desserts, very specific instructions about maintaining a stable temperature.
Yeah, air conditioning.
Yeah, he's even given a BAP and clean linen daily.
Yeah.
And then, of course, constant guard surveillance. I mean, they are not taking any chances.
It's like they're trying to control, like, every aspect of his environment.
Yeah, almost like a laboratory setting. But for a human being.
Right. So it's like this really weird mix of, they think he could be valuable, but they also are really scared of him.
A potential gold mine, but also a potential threat.
Yeah, and so this close scrutiny continues, right, for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
He's kept confined.
Under INS parole.
Right, with the CIA as his sponsor. What were the main arguments that they were using to justify this continued confinement?
Well, the official justification, from discussions we see in April of '64 involving people like Mr. Helms,
Right.
Mr. Houston, Mr. Murphy, was that they needed to debrief him fully.
Yeah, to get all the information out of him.
Every last drop, right?
Yeah.
Because he might have this really crucial information about Soviet intelligence that could be vital to U.S. security.
Right. But there were other people who weren't so sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like the memo even mentions that they thought about deporting him to a third country.
Yeah. Sending him somewhere else entirely.
Yeah, and the FBI, they seemed to think that the information they were getting from him wasn't really worth the risk.
Right? Like, is this really worth all this trouble?
Yeah.
Is he really giving us anything that valuable?
Yeah, so it's like this really fundamental debate right within the government.
And a real tug of war.
Is he the real deal or is he a plant?
Exactly.
And the legal side of this is kind of interesting too, right?
It's very murky.
They were using this extortion and parole case and this idea of mean parole to basically justify holding him for all this questioning, even though he hadn't been charged with any crimes.
Kind of a legal gray area, to put it mildly.
Yeah. But then years later, in July of 1969, there's this document requesting a 6-month extension of his parole.
Right.
And they say it's because he continues to be of operational interest.
Yeah, they're still getting something from him.
Yeah. And that he's provided valuable information. So it seems like at least some people in the CIA, they started to come around on him, right?
It does seem that way, yeah. Like maybe he really was genuine after all.
Yeah. And then it goes even further, right? In October of 1969, the CIA actually recommends approval of Nosenko's application for permanent residency in the U.S.
Wow. So a complete turnaround from confinement to recommending him for permanent residency. That's quite a journey.
That's a big shift, yeah. And what was the reasoning behind that recommendation?
Well, the letter specifically says it's based on his service in the national security interest.
Right.
And the valuable information he's provided.
So they must have gotten something.
It sounds like it, yeah. Something that convinced them.
Yeah, pretty big stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
And talk about something else that pops up in these documents. The agency's review of a manuscript by E. Howard Hunt in the early 70s.
Yeah, this is really interesting.
Yeah, this is kind of a side story, but it's really fascinating because it gives us this glimpse into this constant tension in the intelligence world.
Between secrecy and public disclosure.
Right. So we got these memos from 1973 and 1974 about Hunt's book, which is called
Memoirs of an American Agent Undercover.
Right. And the agency was clearly worried about this book.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
What were they so concerned about?
Well, they were worried that Hunt might reveal classified information.
Yeah.
Either accidentally or intentionally.
Right. Could blow operations.
Yeah, put people's lives at risk.
Yeah.
So they were very carefully going through his manuscript.
Looking for anything that could be a problem.
Exactly. And they found some things.
Yeah, they did. There's this one memo that mentions page 220 of the galley proof.
Oh, yeah, that's a specific one.
What was the problem there?
Well, on that page, Hunt talks about CIA alias documentation.
Right, the cover identities.
Yeah, how they create them, how they use them.
Yeah.
And the agency felt that what he wrote was misleading and could cause problems for their operations.
So even though this was about stuff that had happened in the past,
right,
they were still worried about it.
Oh, yeah, it could still have repercussions.
Yeah. And they actually recommended that the OGC, the agency's legal team, rewrite that whole paragraph.
Yeah, they wanted to make sure it was worded very carefully.
So they were really paying attention to the details.
Oh, yeah, dotting their I's and crossing their T's.
Yeah. And it wasn't just that one instance.
No, they had a whole list.
Yeah, in February 1974, there's this memo that forwards a whole list of what they call hardcore items in Hunt's manuscript that they wanted either deleted or revised.
Hardcore, that's a pretty serious term.
Yeah, and they specifically mentioned pages 12, 14, 19, 21, 24, and 25.
So quite a few things they were concerned about.
Yeah, it really shows you how seriously they took this whole secrecy thing.
Absolutely, they were not messing around.
Yeah. So we've got these two seemingly separate threads, right?
Yeah.
The Nosenko defection and then this Hunt Manship thing.
Right.
But there's this other memo from December 1967 that mentions these lists of names.
True, and alias lists.
Right. And while these documents don't explicitly link these lists to either Nosenko or Hunt, it makes you think, right?
It does, especially in the context of espionage and covert operations.
Yeah.
Think about it, for a KGB officer like Nosenko.
Yeah.
Maintaining a believable cover story was absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
Essential.
And for CIA operatives like Howard Hunt,
Right.
the ability to operate under assumed identities was their bread and butter.
Yeah. So even though we don't have a direct connection,
Yeah.
it's hard not to see how these true and alias lists, this whole world of creating and managing fake identities.
Right.
It's hard not to see how that played into the suspicions around Nosenko and the worries about what Hunt might reveal.
Absolutely. It all ties into that underlying web of secrecy and deception.
Yeah, it's all connected. Okay, so let's wrap things up here.
Okay.
Looking back at all these declassified documents,
Yeah.
the case of Yuri Nosenko, it's just full of these ambiguities,
Yeah.
unanswered questions, right? We see that initial intense suspicion,
Mm.
the extraordinary security measures of prolonged confinement. But then years later, the U.S. intelligence community is saying he's valuable.
Yeah, and recommending him for permanent residency.
Yeah, it's a real head-scratcher.
It really is. It shows you how divided they were
Yeah.
about whether he was genuine or not.
And we may never know the full truth.
Probably not.
And then you have that parallel story of the Hunt manuscript,
Right.
which really highlights that constant battle.
Yeah, between secrecy and transparency.
Yeah. How do you balance those two things?
It's a tough question.
Yeah, it's a tough question. So as we end this deep dive, here's something I want you all to think about.
Mhm.
Considering all these conflicting assessments.
Yeah.
And the fact that so much time has passed.
Right.
What do you think is the true story of Yuri Nosenko?
Yeah, was he a genuine defector or a master manipulator?
Right. And what does it tell us about the nature of intelligence work?
And the challenge of figuring out the truth.
In a world built on deception.
It's a puzzle.
It's a puzzle, and we may never have all the pieces.
But it's fascinating to try to put them together.
It is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
We see you next time.